10 Sports Central will be going over a college football game preview and prediction on the 2020 Gasparilla Bowl between South Carolina and UAB, two teams of which who have had very different seasons. South Carolina is 2-8 coming into a bowl game, which pretty much explains 2020 for you. Meanwhile, for UAB, they are 6-3 coming into this matchup. Both teams also come from very different conferences, so it should make for a very interesting matchup. We're going to be going over a full game preview and prediction on this game here today, starting out with your team trends. For the last game for South Carolina, they lost to Kentucky 18-41, so that was a pretty terrible loss to end off the regular season with. But still, I mean, South Carolina, even though they're 2-8, they still come from a conference that is easily the best in college football right now, and that's going to be a huge factor for South Carolina here, is they're going to have the experience of playing a lot of very difficult teams. I mean, even down the stretch in the past month, they've played both Georgia and Texas A&M, two teams of which were in the top 10, so South Carolina does have experience there. Meanwhile, for UAB, they beat Marshall 22-13, which Marshall being a team that's actually been pretty good this season. That is not a terrible win at all for them. South Carolina is currently on a 6-game losing streak, and they are 2-8, so it's been a pretty rough season for them. But UAB is 6-3 with a 2-game winning streak. But really, for both these teams, you're considering, once again, the conferences. I mean, if we're being totally honest here, the Conference USA is probably the worst conference in football, considering their best team is Marshall, who has taken 2 straight losses, and UAB beat them just a couple of weeks ago. So really, I mean, the Conference USA is probably the worst conference in football, but still, I mean, South Carolina being a 2-8 team, it kind of balances out there. This game's going to be on Saturday, December 26th, noon Eastern time in Tampa, Florida. Spread currently says UAB by 6.5. ESPN FPI is also going UAB here by 52%. Vegas prediction also going with the Blazers here, 34-29 being the current projected final score, which, I mean, UAB being a 6-3 team facing a 2-8 team. Not very surprising to see UAB as a favorite here, considering also they've got a decent amount of momentum coming into this matchup. Here's your stat comparison for this game. South Carolina's got 23 points per game, 36 points allowed. They got 187 passers a game, 167 rush yards, and then for yards allowed, they got 256 passing and then 195 rushing. As for UAB here, they got 28 points per game, 21 points allowed. They got 201 passing, 200 rushing. And then for yards allowed per game, they got 173 passing and then 137 rushing. So really, both teams here have got their bright spots on both sides of the ball. I mean, South Carolina obviously has played a ton of really great defenses over the course of the season. And really, I mean, they haven't had much of a quarterback to rely on, as Hill, their top quarterback, has put up only 1,400 yards on the season. Meanwhile, for UAB here, I mean, they've done decent on offense. I mean, they got their top running back there in Brown. He's put up nearly 900 yards on the season with 10 touchdowns. He's definitely been a huge impact player for this team this season. And then for South Carolina, of course, they got Harris, who's actually been a really good player this season. He's put up nearly 1,200 yards on the year with 15 touchdowns, so he's actually had a good season. But otherwise, for South Carolina, things are kind of a mess right now. I mean, their defense has allowed an average 256 passers per game. So, I mean, for UAB here, knowing that South Carolina, I mean, this rushing defense on the Gamecock side is also not very good. So, I mean, for UAB here, they should really have no problem scoring on South Carolina. It's just a matter of how their defense does. I mean, the UAB defense this season has done pretty well as well. I mean, if you look at their passing defense, only 173 yards allowed per game, which is a really good stat line there. So UAB has been pretty good on the defensive side this season, but both teams, considering we've only seen South Carolina score 23 points per game and UAB has only scored 28 points per game, leads me to believe this game is going to be more of a low-scoring one, considering both teams have a tougher time scoring. Here's your key points for this one. South Carolina's played a tougher schedule. There's no doubt about that. I mean, if you look at UAB here, like, they've played teams such as Rice, Louisiana Tech, Louisiana, Western Kentucky, Marshall, etc. You know, for South Carolina, down the stretch, this team has played Texas A&M, they played Georgia, Kentucky, Missouri. I mean, South Carolina back in the earlier parts of the season played Tennessee, Florida, Auburn. All of those teams that are very good in the SEC, South Carolina has played. So, I mean, yeah, this South Carolina team has got a lot more experience, I think, than UAB does here, and that's going to be the main thing that's got potential for South Carolina, is because they've played a much tougher schedule. Like, if you gave South Carolina the schedule that UAB has, I'm guessing South Carolina would probably be right around the same level that UAB is right now. So, I mean, that's why this game is actually a pretty even matchup, but UAB has got upside and a much better record. That's something you do have to consider as well. UAB has been used to winning. They've won 3 of their last 5. Meanwhile, South Carolina has lost 6 in a row. So, I mean, if you look at the momentum part here, I mean, UAB has got a huge advantage in momentum in comparison to South Carolina. So that's going to be another advantage there for UAB. But once again, do expect a lower scoring game here between both of these teams. I think, considering both teams have had mediocre offenses this season, and both teams have had halfway decent defenses. We will likely be seeing more of a low-scoring game here in this matchup, and that's what I'm going with. I'm going to go with South Carolina here, though. I'm going to go with the Gamecocks to get the win over UAB here, which would be a huge win for South Carolina, knowing it's definitely been a down season for this team. But UAB, once again, this was a very tough one to predict. I will just say that right off the bat. I mean, UAB being a team that's got 4 more wins than South Carolina, I mean, that's kind of a rare matchup in a bowl game. But, I mean, if you look at the schedules here, it really evens out when you consider that UAB has lost to Louisiana Tech, Louisiana, all of those teams. Meanwhile, South Carolina, I mean, they've had to play teams such as Missouri, Georgia, Texas A&M, all of them. And I think that's going to have a huge impact on this game. South Carolina is used to playing some really good teams, and I think that's going to come into play here against UAB here on Saturday. And I'm going to go with South Carolina 27-20 being the final score. So we do see more of a lower to a moderate scoring game, but I think South Carolina once again will get the win. Halftime score is going to be 13-10. But yeah, 27-20 is going to be your final score. I've got South Carolina getting the win over UAB. Well, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this game. Let me know your score predictions. I'll have that down below. Appreciate you guys all sticking around and watching this video. If you enjoyed it, slap a like on it, subscribe as well if you're not already yet, as a real helps of the channel, and I really appreciate that. Once again, thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I will see you all later.